Sue and I, my wife and I, went out to dinner with Bill and Hillary, and I was amazed about her, about how warm and funny. And you knew she's smart, but warm and funny, and a great listener, and that whole spirit of like, who's the real person? Like Dole. You think he was this flat, but he's really funny and interesting. So that's what I like. That kind of like, well, who's the real? Who is Gretchen, or whatever. So that's sort of the fun thing for me. Your grandma, she said, "What you can always find something good in people, right? Do you still believe
Uh-huh. I do. It's hard some days, but I do.
Yeah, it seems to be getting a little harder I'm in Palm Beach. I'm literally a mile from Mar-a-Lago. Well, I won't get political, but it's interesting. Well,
Yeah.
we'll start with something else other than finding the good in people, like the new cabinet members, et cetera, et cetera. Not to, so you got 3 tattoos.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I won't ask where, but what? Or at least one.
I have a shark. I talk about my shark tattoo. Yeah, in the book. It is. It comes from a story that I share in the book about getting ready for my first debate as governor, and it was kind of the call to action, a humorous way of keeping me in the happy warrior mode as I went into my first debate.
Okay. All right.
So I can talk about that if you want.
All right. Well, we might get back to the tattoos.
Okay.
We both, I think, like kind of plain talk. I always this thing about if you mess up, it's your fault up to a point. So take some, own your successes and your failures, that kind of stuff. And a couple of them that I really like, especially in terms of running things as you do, obviously running a state. By the way, my wife didn't want me to do this because she's a Badger, and she's really a Badger. And so the Michigan thing, it's hard for her, but she's being good. She's trying to be a good person.
Well, Spartans are a little easier to like than Wolverines. So I'm actually a Michigan State Spartan. So maybe that'll help.
But Sue almost went there. She was a big swimmer, and she had a scholarship offer to Michigan State and to Wisconsin. But her whole family, literally everybody in her family, every cousin, they all went to Wisconsin. Yeah. But in terms of the executive stuff, just that notion of get shit done, I love that. That's what it is. It's problem solving and getting stuff done. And sometimes you go out. I mean, even what we're doing here, and I might talk to a bunch of librarians and things, and I go, like, don't feel good that we sat in this room and we talked about stuff. If we don't go out and do things, it doesn't matter, Right. But getting stuff done is just, and it's just because you listen to a speech doesn't, mean. The other one is fix the damn roads, which I love.
Thank you.
Yes, exactly. Open the road past Mar-a-Lago. Yeah, that's what I want.
Well, people are willing to tell you what they want. You just have to ask them. Fix the damn roads came from asking people, what can I do for you that make your life better if I'm elected? That's where it all comes from. Too few people listen in any walk these days, but too few people listen.
The roads are a bigger thing than people think about. I have a friend, he grew up all his life in New York, and then they moved down to Georgia. And he's going, I don't know. He said, boy, the roads are beautiful down here. They have good roads here, man. You don't get them in New York. So a lot of stuff, obviously, you had to deal with in terms of monster challenges out in Michigan, COVID, that monster flood that you had, the 500-year kind of flood, the protecting reproductive rights, lessons about dealing with stuff like that, just stuff that, I don't know if that's a very too tough a question, but just the lessons that come out of that. What's hit you about that?
The one thing we know is that there's always going to be some challenge, a crisis, whether you're a governor or you are any other walk of life. And I think what I've learned in those hard, unpredictable times, whether it's a plot or a pandemic or
Yeah.
natural disasters is, you've got to move fast. You got to get as much information as you can, and you have to be able to make decisions. And the only way to make a decision is to make sure that you're surrounded by really smart, creative, thoughtful people. I couldn't have navigated any of this without a massive team of people who helped give me good information so that I could take the actions I thought I needed to in those times of crisis. And I think that's the most important takeaway for me was having
a small team that you depend on, in addition to obviously every department. There's a lot of people in the government, but you have a small group who you really depend on.
I do. It depends on the subject matter, but certainly, in the pandemic, I talked to a lot of our nation's finest experts in epidemiology and infectious disease, because that is not my background. For some of the other challenges, I talked to a lot of my fellow governors and both sides of the aisle, by the way. And
Sure. Yeah, why not?
there aren't many people who confront all the same challenges and pressures that I do, but the other governors do. And I've found that to be a great source of information and help too.
When I was in business, I always felt it was really important, and it still is, I think, in terms of the books, whatever, to have somebody around who will honestly tell you if you have poop in your hat. I'm trying to be a little. Do you have somebody around that you really will say, Gretchen, let me give you, I think you're going too far here, or you're not going far enough, or whatever the heck it is? Or do you have a couple of people like that?
I do. I've got some great folks who, I appreciate dissent. And I'm often the last one to talk in our meetings because I know once I talk, it kind of quiets the room. And so I want debate. But I do remember during the pandemic, I have a good friend named Gary Torgo who called me up, said, "You're doing a great job, but I really think you need to show some empathy for all the business folks who are really worried about losing their business and they don't know what to do. And while you're concerned about saving people's lives, which is paramount, I think acknowledging the pain that folks are feeling on that front too." And I appreciated that. No one else had felt comfortable to say that to me. And I thought it was something that was really important to acknowledge. And I hadn't been, because we were just trying to keep people from dying. But that empathy, I generally think I do well naturally, but I missed it then. And he called me up and told me that, and I appreciated it.
With the Alice Cross character, I think one of the reasons that he's popular is he does something which we all have to do to some extent, which is balance our work with our family lives. And obviously, in the case of Alice Cross, his work is very dangerous and whatever. I don't want to get heavily into the Wolverine Watchmen. I don't want to get into them at all, other than that notion of, okay, here's the thing where you have to balance your work life with the safety of your family, et cetera. Just, you want to talk about that just a little bit, how that works? And now even more with, because the world seems to be spinning a little bit.
Yeah. It's, people use the word balance, and I don't know that there is such a real thing as balance. You have to make choices every day. We make choices about how we spend our time, where we spend our energy, what we take in from the world, and what we put out into the world. Like, we have got agency over all these choices. I have found, especially during the pandemic, it's easy for people to lose sight of seeing one another as human beings, to fail to see the humanity in one another. And closing schools. As I was advising school districts and they were making the choice to close schools, I'll tell you, it was missed on a lot of folks that it was those decisions that meant my own child didn't have prom or a graduation from high school. And that push and pull is really hard, and sometimes worlds collide. But at the end of the day, the people who are relying on you, I think, expect you to put their interests first, whether it's your own child or it's the people of a state you serve.
Yeah. That phrase, that woman in Michigan, and the notion now, it's interesting to me. I have followed women's sports for a long time, partly because my wife she was a big swimmer. But initially, I really liked the University of Connecticut basketball team. And then with Caitlin Clark, I actually somewhere here have a hat that she signed, number 22, which I love. Um, but I think things are really beginning to change in so many areas. Now, women's sports is an obvious one. Volleyball, I don't know if you watch any volleyball, but it's women's volleyball is really great. Women in business, some movement. The idea of a woman president to me personally is just very exciting. And I actually brought up, the notion of, which I found very attractive, the idea of you running against another woman. I thought that would be a really good thing for this country. And then there's no choice because you have to elect a woman. So no matter what, whatever idiots are out there thinking idiotic thoughts, you won't have a choice. But what's your notion about at least on the positive side, women, moving forward, yeah.
Yeah, we've made, it's always striking that with every milestone, there often is a setback. And that's kind of how we see progress move forward. It's not smooth. It's can be wrenching at times. But, we have more women governors in the country right now than we've ever had. Every woman and every person who's in an elected statewide executive office is female in Michigan right now. In this last election, we elected our second woman to be a United States Senator from the state of Michigan. Wisconsin elected Tammy Baldwin. And so I do think that women bring a unique voice to the table, an ability to collaborate, not take things personally, and stay focused on what
thing I think is huge. And in business, I saw that, and that really was just a quick little thing. My Women's Murder Club is one of my big series. And that was all about that, the ability of women to get together, in that case, a policewoman, a attorney, and collaborate. Men, not as good. I even found in business, they would always walk, I got the answer. No, wait a minute. You don't have the answer. Let's talk this through. Anyway, I'm sorry though, but that collaboration thing I think is a big advantage women have. They just are, generally speaking, better collaborating. That's probably a sexist thing to say, but.
But there's, you see how women spend their time and energy. My experience informs the work that I do. So I was a member of the sandwich generation at the age of 29. My mom was dying of a brain tumor. I had just given birth to my first daughter. I was navigating, everything from trying to figure out how can I keep nursing when I'm a legislator and they won't give me a room in which to pump my milk. How do I take care of my mom when her insurance company wrongfully denies paying for her chemo drugs? So it's these things that I fight for. And women disproportionately do those things, raise children, care for parents at the end of their lives. And that's why our voices matter, not just to fellow women, but to boys and girls we're raising, to dads and moms we're helping. And that's why I think it does matter that there is real representation because we all benefit from it.
I'm going to do around Father's Day. I'm going to put out a book which I really love, and I don't love all the books that I do, but I really and emotionally really involved in it. And it's called the #1 Dad Guide, and it's how to be a better dad in 1 hour. And the reason for the 1 hour is just realistically about a lot of dads. They're not going to read the 400-page book. And this just gives them information very, very, very quickly, like things like hugging. My dad, the first time I remember him hugging me was on his deathbed. And with our son, I hug him every day. I always say from when he was a little kid, the ability to say I love you, which a lot of dads have a problem with. But the notion with this book is that there's plenty in there because they don't have anybody to talk to and they're kind of lost. A lot of them, and angry and feeling overwhelmed. And the idea of this book is we can help you in 1 hour. We can help you be a better dad. There'll be 2 or 3 or 4 things in here that are going to help you. And that means your kids are going to benefit from that and your partner's going to benefit from that. Because if you're a better dad, everybody wins. And right now, a lot of men, they're just, and some of it's real and some of it's imagined. But so I love that notion of and the nonfiction stuff, which kind of gets us into true Gretch. So what? First of all, stay out of my lane. I don't run for office, so there's really, no. But so what was your what excited you about telling your story?
Well, it's kind of similar. It's kind of similar to what you were just talking about, how to be a better dad in an hour. True Gretch it's a easily readable book in a short period of time. You can read a chapter and put it down for a few days, and the next one doesn't necessarily rely on the one you just read. But it's things I've learned. I knew that 2024 was going to be a heavy, hard year with the presidential election. And I thought, if I get a question, whether I'm traveling in Michigan or outside of Michigan, if I get the number one question I get is, how do you stay positive when things are so heavy and hard and there's threats against your life and pandemics and all the other stuff that I've had to navigate? And so these are 10 things I've learned that help me stay positive, help me focus on the work, and help me continue to get shit done. And I think that's what I wanted to put out in the world. So like you, right? It's a handbook for how to make a difference in your own way, in your own life, regardless of what walk of life it is.
Now you're going to, in January, I think, you're going to do a young adult version of True Gretch. I love the subhead, Lessons for Anyone Who Wants to Make a Difference, which I think that's really, I think kids will like that. I think they get it. And I think it will be really useful for them. I remember after the big, one of the big hurricanes that hit New Orleans, we have an association with Tulane, and the president there said, okay, if you want to come to Tulane, you have to be willing to volunteer to help in the city of New Orleans. It has to be a thing. Their admissions, it tripled because kids went, this is good. It's a good school. I want to go to a good school. And I love this idea of trying to make a difference.
Yep. I think that's true.
Yeah. And in your state, once again, the whole thing of getting young people to, be positive. Yeah, we can do stuff. What can the kids in your state do? I don't know. I mean, you could probably see a list of priorities in terms of, here's 3 things you could do in our state that would really make a difference in our state. Right. I mean, I think that at any rate, but no,
I see it in my own kids. My kids are 22 and 21, and they are much more dialed in than I ever was at that age. They are paying attention. There are things that they're very worried about, whether it's individual rights or climate, or inequality and creating opportunity. And so I'm encouraged by what I see in their generation, but it's on all of us to do what we can to feed that and to help inform it so that they can make an even bigger difference than they're already inclined to do. Yeah.
What could they do? I mean, it's one thing to think about global warming. It's another thing to actually do something. What could they do? And I won't pin you down, but I love that notion of you're in a position where you could actually get a lot of people to do something. I thought that during the election, it would be an interesting thing to have 2 or 3 million women march on Washington. I thought the timing, that would be a good, useful. Yeah, okay. Let's make a statement here. Let's something that people are going to hear and think about.
I think in one of the things in the book that I write about is, and I expanded on it in the young adult version, is, every day in this country we see mass shootings, and young people who were on campus at Michigan State when there was one on campus really mobilized. They got the legislature to finally change the law, and I signed the new law into effect on Michigan State's campus. And I cite that because some of these things do feel so overwhelming and so big, and an individual might think, I can't make a difference, so why engage? But I wanted to use that example because it made a difference. And now we've got secure storage and background checks and extreme risk protection orders because young people mobilize. I also tell the story about 10 years it took between when I had to share my story about being an assault survivor, sexual assault survivor, to when, as governor, I could change the law to protect a woman's ability to access the health care she needs in the wake of an unplanned pregnancy. And it was, those are two lessons that I show that one person can make a difference.
Well, and I think if people engage and it does work, you probably got them for life then, in terms of, okay, yeah, this, I can make a difference, and I did make a difference. So I love that area. It gets back once again to this action versus blah, 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 The book that I have out coming with President Clinton in the summer, the title is The First Gentleman. How's your first gentleman?
He's good. He's he is honing his guitar playing skills. He retired during the pandemic, and so he's occupying himself in those pursuits to make himself better.
All right. Is he any good as a guitarist, or
yeah? I mean, he better be. He plays it all the time, James.
Okay. Is he in a band?
He's not in a band. He's not a public player, but he's gotten pretty good.
Just around the house. All right. Okay. I did one of these interviews with James Carville, which was a treat. And, he's very smart about stuff, I think. He's not always right, but, thinks he's always right. But, and one of the truisms that with elections and pretty much anything, nothing matters but winning. You lose by 10 votes, or and he talked about Kamala, and he felt that, in his opinion, there were 5 or 6 Democrats, including you, that would have beat Trump. In his opinion, he didn't think she could, and it's not a knock on her, but that she was seen as Biden, and the country wanted a change, whether that was fair or unfair. But they wanted a change. They do that all the time. They don't think things through. Or get their story straight, but that notion. But he also said that he felt that in the campaign she didn't have a motivating message. That was his opinion. I'm sure you thought about it. Would you have had a motivating message? Do you think, or do you have one? Or well, you don't need to lay it out here, but it's an interesting area, I think.
Well, I would just say, the campaign started really late, for lots of reasons outside of her control.
Yeah.
But not to make excuses. I would just simply share my experience running for governor in Michigan. And I talk a bit about this in True GRETCH. I traveled all across Michigan. I spent 2 years really listening to people in Michigan. And my favorite question to ask was, if I'm fortunate enough to get elected, what can I do that'll make your life better? And over and over again, people will tell you what's important if you ask them. And over again, people said, fix the damn roads. And when I'm in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan or downtown Detroit and people say the same things, that tells me it's something that is really important. And I was in a Detroit Children's Hospital doing a kind of a tour, and I happened upon a room where a woman and her son were in, and she was willing to chat with me. I didn't know, it's a stressful time if your child's in the hospital under any situation. And I said, if I'm fortunate enough to get elected, what can I do that'll make your life better? And she said, fix the damn roads. And I was shocked. I thought she would talk about healthcare or education or childcare, but it really is about all those things, because her money and her precious time.
Yeah, specifics. I'm not a big fan of the way a lot of research is done, a lot of polling, because it's too, you're not really getting to people. You're not talking to them in a way where they can respond honestly and not feel threatened and, whatever. Yeah, right. But it's going to be specifics. And I'm sure there are other things besides the roads, but, yeah. But that says a lot. That says a lot. It just says a lot. Like fix the roads. God knows what. I mean, you probably know all the other things that said beyond the roads.
Well, yeah, and she told me, when she hits a pothole and the rim on her wheel is busted, it's hundreds of dollars that she wasn't expecting to spend. It was money out of childcare. It was time from seeing her child in the hospital. Like it has huge reverberations. So when people say fix the damn roads, it's not really about the roads. It's about whether or not they can get to work, whether they can be safe, whether or not they can keep money in their pockets. And that's where government must do better.
It's real and it's symbolic of a lot of other things, which is what I was trying to get at. So, do you think another book, or are you going to, kind of get out, leave me a little room on the bestseller list, or?
I got to tell you, writing a book is not easy, and I had a collaborator, so I don't know how you do what you do. So don't worry, I'm not gonna try to.
No, I think we should do another book. I think it's a good idea. I think, and some of them are good. I thought Bill Clinton's first book was terrific. I thought Obama's, both of them, I thought they were quite good, really good. And you got to feel, and so bad with names. The vice president. I mean, I thought his book was very special too. The vice president to be. Last little area, fame. My wife and I, this a couple of months ago, we went to a little Italian restaurant that we go to here, and we had to wait for a couple of minutes. And then the waiter took us down a little place. He took us down the main aisle, the aisle there. And this lady pops up and she goes, I know you. You sold us our life insurance. And I'm like, oh my God. And she wouldn't let go of it. She was insisting, no. I know you did. And I go, no. I said, for starters, I would never sell life insurance in South Florida or hurricane insurance, whatever. So, but the fame thing, and obviously you have it now. I don't know that you were expecting it. Maybe you did. And how does that hit you now? That and your kids even, and your guitar playing husband, and yeah,
it's really strange. And I was in when I'm traveling. I assume people in Michigan know who I am because I spent a lot of money telling them who I am in both my campaigns, and I've been governor now 6 years. But when I leave the state and realize that people know who I am, it's always surprising, number one. But also I think I have to be reminded to, I'm not just Gretchen Whitmer when I'm here in Michigan. I have to behave myself.
Anything else? I'm good. You have a question that you want to throw out there, or?
I just, I'm a big fan, and I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you. I loved meeting you at Morning Joe a few months ago when you were talking about your book.
All right. Well, thanks so much. And True Gretch is great. And I think the idea of the young adult, I think that's really, really good. And all the parents that will touch here, it's a good, because the kids probably won't buy it themselves. Some will, maybe in Michigan, but around the country, give it to the kids. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. Bye-bye.